All right, I'm back. I am back. That cut me off. I am using a free software, obviously. So I put the rest of the 5 points on the graph that we had from our table of values. And I basically just tried to fit a nice smooth curve to it. If it's not perfect, that's okay. In fact, I'll show you a second way to do this, and you'll see that I didn't quite go high enough and low enough, but that's okay. If I'm asking you to sketch a graph, I'm not looking for it to be perfect. Okay, so let's think about this second way to do it. Actually, I'm going to go back to here first just to show you what it should have looked like. I graphed it up in Desmos. So here it is in Desmos. Here's our sine x curve, and then here is the curve of our new function, 2 sine x plus 45 plus 2. If we look at the domain of this, remember x goes on forever and ever in each direction. So the domain is x's element of the reals. And in this case, the y goes from 0. So see, I was a bit off on my graph, but that's okay. It goes from 0 all the way up to positive 4. So my range is y is the element of the reals, every number between and including 0 and including 4. Okay, so that's where we use the less than or equal to signs. Okay, so the second way you can do this is using different type of table of values. And that is taking into account what these numbers do to our x values and what they do to our y's. The only number that affects your x is the one that's in the D position. So remember, this is making the graph move to the left. So instead of my 0, it's actually going to be 0 minus 45. And I can do that for all of them here. My new y, well, my A makes the graph stretch or compress. So that's going to change my y. And this in the C position also moves my y up and down. So if I perform these operations on all my y values, that's going to give me a new set of y's, which will give me a new set of coordinates that I can graph. So let's go over to my camera again. Hopefully it is still on. It is not, so just bear with me here as I get it going. Those are my children from a while ago. Okay, put you back in here. Make sure that it's facing the right direction. There we go. Should have known this was going to happen. I should have checked, but that's okay. Okay, so if I take all my old x values and subtract, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit, and subtract 45 from them, that's going to give me my new x values. So 0 minus 45 gives me negative 45. 90 minus 45 is positive 45. 180 minus 45 is 135. 270 minus 45 is, oh gosh, that must be 225, I believe. Geez, I'll check with my calculator. I'm pretty sure that's right. Okay, and then 360 minus 45 is 315. So those are my new x values. Now for my new y's, you're going to do 2 times your y value plus 2. So 2 times 0 is 0 plus 2 is 2. Okay. 2 times 1 is 2 plus 2 is 4. 0 times 2 is 0 plus 2 is 2 again. Negative 1 times 2 is negative 2 plus 2 is 0. And then we're back to 0. So I'm going to get another 2. So I already have the original sine graph plot it, and now we're going to use these values to graph the new one. So negative 45 and 2, 45 and 4, it's about right, because it's about halfway between 0 and 90. 135 and 2, right there. And then 225 and 0, 225 and 0. And then 315 and 2. 315 and, no, where's 2? 2. And now we're going to do a nice curve through that. That's the nice thing about doing it this way is that you get the same 5 points again. Like you get, it's a halfway, then a peak, halfway, opposite peak. So you get that. It was a little easier than, when we graphed this one, it was a bit hard to see if this was going to be the top or not. Either way is fine. There is another way of doing it, if you've seen it, where you work with the point and you subtract 45, so you go to the 45, then you multiply the y value by 2, so 0 times 2 is 0, so it stays there, and now you add 2 and you plot it there. If you know that way too, that's totally fine. Any way is completely fine by me, as long as you're getting the right graph. So there we go. Let's go back to my presentation here. Guys, this is hard. It's way easier, and I miss you guys when we're in the classroom. And I know you miss me, Okay, so getting key information from an equation. So we can, remember our first lesson on periodics, we were talking about equation of the axis, amplitude, phase shift, and vertical translation. Actually, we weren't talking about these yet, but now you know. We can get these directly from the equation. We don't need to graph it just to see them. Equation of the axis we get from C, because it's going to move our sine, the middle of our sine graph, up by whatever C is. So whatever number this is, it tells us the equation of the axis. It also tells us the vertical translation, so how much the graph has gone up or down. The amplitude, we just need to take the absolute value of the number in the A position. Absolute value means don't take a sign, okay? Phase shift, well, that's where D is. So D tells us if it's going to the left or right, and then how many units. So let's take a look at these answers. So if we have this one, our amplitude's going to be 3. It does not have a phase shift, so there's not going to be anything here. And then our C is 4, so that tells us what the equation of the axis is. And it also tells us what our vertical translation is. For this one, we have an amplitude of 2, a phase shift of 30. Oh, is it going to the left or right? Remember, it's the opposite, so it's going to go to the left. And then vertical translation is -1, and that tells us the equation of the axis is y equals -1. Okay, and actually I'm going to change that in there. This should say y equals -1, okay? Because remember, it's an equation, so it should say y equals. Oh my goodness. Just say, Miss Gilbert, just leave it. It doesn't matter. Okay, I'm almost done, guys. Okay, the last thing you're going to do with this stuff today is to determine an equation from the graph. So the red one is our normal sine curve, okay? The blue one is a different sine curve, and we're going to figure out what the equation is just by looking at it. So what you're going to do for this, you're going to figure out just by looking at the graph what the phase shift is. So that's how much it's gone to the left or right by, what the equation of the axis is. Remember, that's halfway between the bottom and the top, and what the amplitude is. That's the distance from the equation of the axis to the top. So phase shift, let's look at this. So the peak of our regular sine graph is at 90 and the peak of ours is at 60. That means it's gone to the left by 30, right? There we go, left by 30. Now equation of the axis. That means we have to find the halfway point between 1 and -3. So basically you're finding that average, right? Or you can think, okay, I have to go to 2 steps to get to -1, 2 steps to get to -3. Anyway, the halfway point between -3 and 1 is -1. That tells us the vertical shift as well when we make the equation. The amplitude, remember, is the distance of the peak from the equation of the axis. So from this -1 line. So the distance from -1 to +1 is 2. Okay, so that really just tells us what numbers to put into our equation. A was 2, right? Our amplitude was 2. So there's 2. We went to the left by 30. So remember, it's going to have the opposite sign you want. So we add 30, and then we went down by -1, or down by 1, or you know what I mean. So then we're going to put a -1 at the end. And that is it, guys. There are 2 days of practice. You don't necessarily have to do day 7 because it's similar to what you did in the Desmos activity at the beginning, but it's always good to practice. Once you do those and you feel comfortable with them, you can do the exit card. I have created a, it is on paper, sorry guys. It's just 1 page though, it's 2 questions, and it's basically just doing what we did in the lesson. So if you can write that out, take a picture of it, and then put it in the assignments tab. So what I'll do, if we go to Brightspace, I'll put an assignment in here that says 2.8 periodic transformation quiz or something like that, and it'll be in here for you, okay? I will also do these solutions up for the practice homework for cycle 2, days 7 and 8, so that you can check your solutions with mine. Okay, this is the last lesson of this week. There are only 2 lessons this week because this one's really long. Okay, I know this week coming up, or this weekend, is Easter weekend. So have a good long weekend. Try to get outside and do things you love to do. And I'll see you next week. Or you'll hear me next week anyway. Okay, bye guys, miss you.